I mean, I also feel like that there's a subliminal aesthetic. You know, I went to the factories to see how it was produced and how the decision-making process was developed, and you know, there is an aesthetic. There is a point of decision-making that's really an aesthetic decision, where there are a number of engineering moves that could be of similar value for functionality. So how the end form, you know, what's selected in the end, is based on some philosophy and sense of aesthetics, and so in a way it's sort of like the last ghosts of modernism. It has a very architectural kind of look to it, and
well, they were designed, you know, and that's what's really, you know, neat about them, and that there's very little recognition of that until you actually see this writ large, and then you see a vocabulary, and you see a kind of you see the properties that are given to it, and you know, a kind of currency.
Yeah, and I find them to be very, you know, very spatial. If you can allow your eye to sort of like wander into the space,
totally.
It's you know, it feels like a space architecture. Or, you know, as kids, like we used to play with them as, you know, with action figures and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's sort of like a
well, there's a futurist feeling to it. Yeah, absolutely, and a sense of infinity too, because these spaces that invite you in are you know, don't have any visible sort of finite quality to them. They're really there for infinite exploration. So
yeah, once I realized like how they were made, and that there was this digital design process, I went to the factory and I made a piece which was basically the 3D version, or you know, digital 3D of the packaging form set into an implied space. So I did basically the same collage, but in a 3D program, which was also an early version of a navigable 3D space on the web.
Okay.
So the piece was set up in a couple of shows at Arte Space, the new museum, and the Henry Art Gallery in Seattle, as an interactive piece where someone would sit in a chair and could mouse navigate through this space, and kind of like as if they were flying through the fabric.
Was that one of the earlier attempts to do web sculpture?
Yeah, it was. That's probably like one of the more sophisticated web pieces that I did. I had a lot of help from a colleague who was doing architecture and web art and digital art in general, and so together we solved all the technical things. Well, he had the technical expertise, and which really, you know, brought it to life, and it was very. I had these. It was great to be able to kind of go beyond gravity with this piece. Like they're kind of stacked up in a kind of Brancusi kind of repetition of forms. So there's this kind of dialogue to that, and like Armand and Nevelson and so forth. But then there is no gravity, so the composition is freed in the z-axis, and that to me was very like, for instance, in that image there, it was very liberating as a sculptor to imagine something like that. And so I'm working on, this is kind of an edition piece, like software. It comes in versions. So I showed the 1.0 and then I showed the 2.0. Now I'm working on the 3.0 version, which is each stage is more involved. So it's went from, you know, 1 year to 2 years, and now it's going to be probably 5 years before.
Do your installations always have a digital component?
There's digital something within everything. Yeah, it's part of the process at some point, or it's I'm making stuff you know, into booklets, or I'm thinking through it in a kind of like digital sketchbook kind of way. So it's either starting there or ending there, or it's kind of inhabiting a space between being in on a web or kind of displayed.
You're sort of hard to classify as an artist, because you don't just make mixed media works. You work in mixed media, and so you have your manifestos and your you know, your published works, and your then you have more two-dimensional things, then a three-dimensional web or digital pieces, and then the site-specific stuff, and then you know, I mean, you're kind of a metaphor yourself for technology and production.
Thanks. I try to like it's a value for me. It's something I believe in, and something that I admire in older artists like or Bruce Nauman, or newer artists also like Matthew Barney, who embraced the whole range of possibilities, and I think that it's also a very American.
Well, it's very entrepreneurial, which brings in the capitalism part, you know, and the idea of you being a businessman.
You know, that's also, you know, super Warholian.
Yeah.
He was one of the first to realize, like, well, if you, you know, want to get down to some production, like there's better be some capital behind it, and he was clever in the way he organized his studio and his flow of capital in order to free himself as an artist.
Right.
And that's really the major goal for me. It's not. I mean, there are a couple of interests. You know, I was in the early kind of internet boom age. I was helping develop a few things as a sort of conceptualist in the equation, and those didn't turn out to be, you know, multi-million-dollar ventures, but it was. You know, it was an intellectual exercise, and
it's something that serves you now.
Yeah, it's something that the organization of that has seeped into, has bolstered like the way that the studio functions, and you know, America is very business oriented, but when it comes to art, it likes it, you know, as dirty, messy, and kind of, you know, it was looking for a kind of authenticity based on maybe Jackson Pollock as a model. Like the more drunk, fucked up, and you know, disturbed the artist is, the more real it is.
Yeah. Well, because all artists are that way, right?
Yeah.
You need that. You need that to propel your.
You certainly have to be crazy to engage in art as a full-time venture. But I think, you know, it's now. The potential for expression is so amazing with these new tools that
limitless.
It requires kind of engaging with the larger, broader society.
There is that. You know, it's funny you mention that, but you know, that's something that technology does to you as an artist, is that it kind of removes that barrier, that isolation that a lot of artists are working in, you know, sort of a room of one's own. But as you said before, you know, you collaborated with people whose expertise you needed in order to make, and I think that there is more of that kind of partnering.
Yeah, and it really brings a lot to the work. Like the sophistication and the elegance of the end product can really be heightened by having like a number of expert voices that come to the picture. And I think you know, whereas it was like a massive leap, you know, to give Jean-Claude credit with Christo, it's you know, understood now that there is that, you know, the whole kind of cycle of art is the whole art world in itself is sort of like a large collaboration in process. In my first annual report, I made some diagrams to that effect to kind of just elucidate my understanding of that, and kind of put that out there as a diagram to see what other people thought about that, and to also just kind of promote the new idea of new art, that the you know, the 21st century type of art, as opposed to you know, what most people understand from Time Life, you know, in the 50s. And
static, you know, figuration or something,
for instance, or just just the you know, the social situation of the artist is what they were discussing before. So the whole range. We can take a look at that if that's of interest.
I would love to.
Okay, I'll go grab the briefcase. Be right back.
Okay.